Welcome, class, to our first week of online notes. We'll start with a pretty short chapter for now, chapter 17, which is all about foreign policy. We're talking about how we deal with other countries on Earth, and this is actually one of the more straightforward chapters because we're not dealing with our own domestic politics. We're just talking about how we deal with other countries. So, what are foreign affairs and national security? So, anything that we deal with other nations is the responsibility of what we call the State Department. The State Department is the group of people that work in other countries for us. They talk to other countries for us. We have people that work in almost every single country on Earth, minus a few countries like in North Korea that are not safe enough, or countries that are so small that we honestly don't care enough to build an entire embassy on their place of, whether that be a place that has like a few hundred people in their country, a few thousand people, or just a place that's so small that it's easier just to have a embassy next door. So you will have 1941, when we entered World War II, we had been an isolationist country for most of our history. We did not want to fight the rest of the world. We did not care about what the rest of the world did. We just wanted to stay in America, maybe mess around with South America a little bit, but overall we didn't want to deal with anyone. We disliked all alliances, as George Washington told us not to get into them, and we kept to ourselves. That changes, though, because we get to World War II, we start to take up our current role as leader of the, quote, free world. So any country that is free or has a democracy, we are kind of their leader. We are the biggest country, we have the biggest democracy, and we're a country that wants to take care of other countries. We have certain constants in our history. We have things like some parts of policy have not changed over time, which is what a constant is. For example, we have support of democracy over dictatorships. We always believe that it's better to have democracy than dictatorships because that's better for the people there. We don't always follow this very well, but we don't get to do stuff that make a lot of sense sometimes. So sometimes we will support a dictatorship over a democracy if we feel like the dictatorship stops a worse thing, be it Islamic terrorism or communism or whatever. We like freedom of the oceans. We want everybody to be free to roam the oceans as we need to. America has the best Navy on Earth, so we like to keep that as a thing. Okay. We also like to have the right to intervene if we want. This is just basically the idea that no matter how free we like other countries to be, we like to make sure that they know that, hey, if you don't do what we want, that we have a right to mess with your country, though we don't like anyone messing with our country. We like to reduce nuclear weapons nowadays. We used to want as many nuclear weapons as possible, but nowadays it's not really necessary, and the more nuclear weapons there are, the less safe we are as an Earth. We like some flexibility. Presidents have changed our positions on countries. So, for example, Trump, with his best friend Vladimir Putin, is less critical of Russia than past presidents. Obama wasn't a very good fan of Putin. George W. Bush wasn't as big of a fan as Trump was. Trump is also way more supportive of Israel than any other president in American history. You'll find like Obama is the exact opposite. So he disliked Russia, and he's probably the least supportive president of Israel in American history. He didn't actually want to help Israel that much. Sometimes we support countries that are bad at human rights, so countries like Saudi Arabia, so that we can be united against a common enemy like an Iran that we hate a lot. Saudi Arabia doesn't let women drive until like 2 years ago, but we're okay with that as long as Iran doesn't get too powerful. You'll have people like the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who is still our Secretary of State. You'll see him a lot today because he's dealing with the coronavirus overseas and what we can do to talk to other countries about that. He is formerly the CIA director for Trump, and then he was moved over to being the Secretary of State. So he used to deal with the spies in other countries for Trump, but now he deals with the more straightforward part of dealing with other countries. He's considered to be a very competent leader, but he's also somewhat of a yes man to Trump. He's not someone that's going to say that Trump's an idiot. He's not going to say Trump did a bad job. He's always going to be pretty supportive of the president. This job is considered to be the most important cabinet position besides the vice president. And it is very, very important that they agree with the president on major things. If they think that China is awesome, but the president doesn't, you can't have a foreign policy where the president hates China, but then the person talking to China is very like, oh, you guys didn't do anything wrong. You guys are really awesome. Okay, the duties of the Secretary of State or of the State Department is that they have to do passports. So if you want to travel to other countries, the Secretary of State is a leader of the State Department, so they approve you to go to that country, unless America has a special agreement with their country. We have quite a bit amount of countries on Earth where you don't need special permission to visit. So if you went to the UK, the only thing you would need is a general passport. You wouldn't need anything special. There are some countries, though, that they need to know who you are before you come into the country. We have people called ambassadors. They go to every foreign country. We send someone to almost every country so that if their leader wants to talk to America, they can't all talk to the president immediately. So they talk to our ambassador, and they'll be like, why is America doing this? And the ambassador will tell them, we believe this as Americans, or the president likes to believe this, so this is what it's going to be. They speak as leaders on our behalf to these countries. There's a thing called diplomatic immunity, where ambassadors and their families are not subject to any local laws. America can remove a person, and they face no different or no punishment back home. So, as an example, we had an ambassador in England, or the UK, and they actually ran over a kid, a teenage boy, because they were driving on the right side of the road, but in Britain you drive on the left side of the road. So they committed a traffic crime in Britain. However, they were the wife of an ambassador of ours, so she could not be punished for that. She was taken back home to America, and she will never stand trial for killing that kid, whether she meant to do it or not. These can be really good because in the past, in history, you could just say, oh, your ambassador did this, so we're going to kill him. No, you can't do that, because then no one would want to be an ambassador. So usually you get diplomatic immunity. I've been told by my relative who works in Washington, D.C., that there's a lot of ambassadors in D.C., because every other country comes to Washington, D.C. to talk to our president and to our congresspeople. A lot of people who have diplomatic immunity, they can actually feel like they can park wherever they want because they cannot get tickets because they have diplomatic immunity. So sometimes it can be a great thing, sometimes it's not a great thing. The Defense Department is another thing that has to deal with our foreign policy. It's run by a civilian leader, who's the president, but then he delegates someone to do the day-to-day business. So our Defense Department leader, last year it was Patrick M. Shanahan. He was a temporary person for the Defense Department, and it is an important thing that we have those. We usually have someone who's a general, but the first general we had was James Mattis, and he was a general that was really good, but he eventually had to break with Trump because he did not believe what Trump believed. So you will have things where they have to run military or they run the intelligence, so they usually have experience in that. And right now, I do not have his face on the notes. It has now been replaced as of a few months ago. There's a guy called Mark Esper. He has been running the department, but he is not technically the leader he is the leader because they did finally approve him. Sorry. So we have a different guy than Patrick Shanahan. Other agencies we've had, the CIA is, what many people know, is our spy program, responsible for gathering any information we need from governments trying to steal their secrets and sometimes the CIA assassinates other people. Homeland Security works in our country. They fight any terrorism that they can, and they do other security things, such as safety in general. And then actually another part of the whole outside of the country thing is NASA, because they do space travel and technology. So they deal with a lot of countries in a lot of different ways. And then our history with other nations, strategies after World War II that we have collective security, so we actually choose to make gigantic alliances so no one will ever attack us again in a big way. Obviously we had like 9/11 terrorist attacks, but they were meant to attack America only. No country would ever go to war with us and then actually try to invade us, because they have to face the biggest country on earth for military, which is us, and then add every country in Europe basically. It'd be so hard. So that's why we also have deterrence, so we become so strong that no nation ever messes with us again. There will not be another Pearl Harbor. No other country will dare to ever attack us again.